This is the Big Woods Bucks podcast. Come explore the big woods and timber in North America with your host, Maine master guide and deer tracking expert Hal Blood. Listen to Hal and co-hosts Lee Libby and Joe Cruzi as they unlock the secrets of big woods whitetails. Each episode will provide valuable insights into the tried and true system Hal has used for the last 40 years to scout, locate, and hunt mature big woods bucks. Listen and laugh as the crew discusses Hal's legendary adventures and learn how to apply a lifetime's worth of lessons from the big woods to your own hunting and outdoor adventures.
Welcome to the Big Woods Bucks podcast. This is your host, Hal Blood, and I'm sitting here with my co-hosts, Lee Libby.
Hey, Hal.
And Joe Cruzi.
Hello.
This is episode 4, and today we're going to talk about guns and ammo for the big woods hunting.
What's the best gun, Hal? I know your answer.
Oh, you know what I tell people? The best gun is the one you're most comfortable with, and it fits you like in its extension of your arm.
Yep.
Everybody knows probably what mine is, but I'm kind of partial to my 7600 carbine .6. But that's not the only gun to use. So we'll talk about this and some other things today. You know, brands, models. Everybody's got their own choice. We're not going to we don't have to pigeonhole people, because once you start doing that, guess what? We'll lose half our listeners out there.
It doesn't matter what you use, as long as you can hit with it, right?
Well, yeah, that's the whole point of it. Guiding over all the years, guys would call up and, what should I use for a gun? What should I bring for a gun? And
Usually the first question, it's one of the first things, whether it's moose or deer or whatever it is. It's what gun should I use?
Bring the one you can hit the target with. And that's kind of funny too. People think that if you can cut holes with your bullets on the target at 100 yards, off the bench, that's the best thing in the world. Well, it isn't. I'd rather have a hunter that can hit a 6-inch pie plate at 50 yards offhand and shoot 5 times in 10 seconds and do it than a guy that can bench rest at 100 and cut holes, because that's what it takes in the big woods. You don't have time usually to, get a perfect rest and watch your breathing and all that stuff like you learn about. It's a whole different world,
Well, I guess since, you already said your favorite gun's a 7600, why is it the go-to gun? Why do you like it the best?
Well, that's a good question. I started out when I was a kid. I just kind of inherited from my father. He passed down a Winchester 94 30-30. That's back then in them days. We didn't have any money. He wasn't going to buy me a new gun, so he passed that one down to me, and I used that when I was a teenager and killed several deer with it. It was a great gun, still is. But then one of his cousins, when I started hunting down a relative's hunting lodge down east in Maine, because I grew up in southern Maine. That's basically where I was hunting, kind of rural and some farmland and overgrown country. And then he ended up giving me my cousin gave me a Remington 721 bolt action 270, and I started using that, and I got used to it. I'm left-handed. It was a right-handed bolt, and I just got used to shooting it, and I killed quite a few deer with that one. And I made the switch to the 7600 when I started hunting in the big woods up north, because that 721 had a scope on it. And after I got following these bucks around and carrying my gun all day in all the conditions, the scope was fogged up, so I knew that wasn't very helpful. And then it wasn't really fast enough sometimes. Sometimes I'd get a quick shot, but I couldn't get a second shot, if a deer took off or was, running away or whatever, So I figured I had to have something a little quicker, and I'd been reading about the 7600, back when we was kids. We all read Larry Benoit's book and stuff, and he promoted the Remington 7600 carbine. I said, I'm going to try one of them. So I actually, before that, I bought the 7400 because I got it cheap. I think I made a trade, which was about $100 for that gun. And I carried the 7400, the semi-automatic, one year, and I didn't like it. It just didn't balance right. It felt a little heavy, so I went and bought the 7600, and once I did that, it was like I never looked back. It just carried so nice, and it was about a pound lighter, and Just liked it.
Did you have problems? I know I never used the 7400, but or the 740 rather. It was always they call it the Jam Master and all that. Was that a reputation that was earned, or is that just something that?
No, I don't think. Actually, Lee can answer to that because that's what Lee hunts with.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
You know, I started with same as Hal, 30-30 lever action. Bought it from an old state trooper friend for $120. I think I was 13 years old. The reason I bought that was because the year before I had wounded a big doe with a 20 gauge slug and told my dad that was the last time I'd hunt with that. But I progressively worked up to the automatic, which the way that I started hunting with the automatic was after the Marine Corps and shooting the M16s. I was like, I like this automatic. I just keep pulling the trigger. So, yes, first one, shot a nice buck with a friend of mine had a 308 Woodsmaster, and it was his grandfather's gun. But one of the extractors were pretty near worn off. And that would jam on occasion, but you usually could get 2 shots out of it. And so I wasn't in love with it, and then I bought a new 7400 carbine. And that, to this day, is what I call the meat stick. It's got a lot of notches in the stock of it. And no, never. Lots of times I don't even think about pulling the trigger. You see the deer, you see the horns, I pull up. It's never, to this date, failed me. I don't take care of it. I throw it in the corner when I get home. Some nights I leave it in the truck for 2 or 3 weeks on end and just abuse it. And at the end of the season, I wipe it off and throw it in the box.
I see it's got electrical tape holding the fore end on.
Yeah, that was from the mounted camera. I actually got a 10-pointer on film one day. I shot him, and everybody laughed about my gun-mounted camera, and it was kind of gaumy. But
how did the footage come out?
It was okay, but he was like 75 yards away, so the footage, it looks like, but you can clearly see, and I didn't realize it, I guess, when I was pulling the trigger, but the deer takes off from my right side, and there's openings in the woods, and I can see these openings with my peripheral vision, and every time he came to an open, I'd pull the trigger, and I'd automatically pull ahead to the next opening and fire, and pull ahead to the next opening and fire. And after 3 openings, when I finally walked up to him, he had 3 holes in him. And, that goes back to Hal saying, take a guy that can shoot 5 times in 10 seconds over, and that was just pie plate. There was a pie plate section on his front shoulders that had holes in it. But no, I haven't experienced any jamming with that 7400 at all.
Yeah, I think it got the. You hear two school. You do hear that it would jam, but usually it's because people didn't clean them. And the fore end, it's the same on the 7600. That collects snow and spruce needles and everything else goes down inside that fore end. And on them 7400s, you've got a spring in there, and that's where your gas ports come through, and that rusts up. I've seen some of them take them apart, and the whole spring's all rust.
Yeah, they never knew it came apart.
Right. Nobody takes them apart.
Right.
They're like Lee. They wipe it down, throw it in the corner. But Lee's been lucky. He hasn't done that. But that's usually was the problem. If they take them to a gunsmith, they get a good cleaning, and they function fine. And then the other thing that happens, and it's with any pump or semi-automatic, would be if you drop the magazine on the ground and you bend one of those ears, will cause a malfunction too. So you got to kind of be careful.
Is that just because it's not holding it up tight enough in there?
Yeah, well, if one of the ears that guides the bullet in,
if
one of them is bent, it won't guide it in right. Yeah. It'll flip up and it'll catch the side or the top or something. So people don't realize that. I mean, it's common. You hunt and you drop it on the ground, you pick it up, you put it in your pocket, but that's another cause of it. And most people, the average person, would never know that. But if they take it to a gunsmith, they know, and they call it tuning it back in,
So I grew up hunting in the South, and my first gun 20 years ago hunting up in these woods was not the perfect rifle. I found out the hard way real quick. So my first gun was a 30-30 Winchester as well, but I didn't know enough to bring that along with me. Instead, I brought a Browning A-bolt 270 with a Leupold scope with a 50 millimeter objective.
That's a snow catcher right there.
Oh yeah,
That's a regular snow scoop.
that was the only week that one ever made it to Maine. That was the first year that I'd been hunting up here in Maine, but not really. I hadn't put the effort into tracking, and you realize quickly that that's like dragging an anchor around through the woods, as opposed to a rifle that's going to help you. So I also had read the books and didn't take long. I think the next year I had the 7600, and I've gone through. I also hunt with a automatic. I, like you, Lee. I like to pull that trigger fast and let the lead fly sometimes.
I don't know if I could think to jack the shell out. You know what I
well,
mean?
probably now because you're so
why?
trained to.
Yeah. Anything you get used to. I know the guys that, like Lee Shanzy, he uses lever action and he uses it just like an automatic. It's a reflex action. I never know I'm pumping my gun. I don't know I ever pumped it. I just know it's ready to send another one as soon as I need it, you know.
Right.
I remember shooting this buck. I call him Wingnut there. He was, when I caught up to him, I caught him standing down that skid road, and he was standing in the whips. And the whips was covering his whole body. It's just his head and neck was sticking up. So I just pulled right in on the shoulder, and I was hoping the bullet would get there, you know, because it was a lot of whips down through there. It's about 50, 60 yards away. And I fired, and when I did, he jumped right up in the air, like kind of to whirl around. And I hit him the second shot in midair, and then he hit the ground again, and his next jump, he was disappearing down over like a knoll, and I sent another one right at his Texas heart shot there, and I hit him all 3 times. It was just like boom, 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 like that. I didn't know. I didn't know I was racking these shells. Like I said, that's what you have to do when you get these quick shots or in the big woods, is you got to have something you can operate like that. And you can't. I know a lot of guys carry bolt action still, and that's fine if that's what they're comfortable with, but you'll never get shots off like that with a bolt action. It's just you can't do it that quick. But levers you can. Yeah, there's guys use them levers. And
You have you don't run a scope on yours,
I do.
do you?
Yeah, 2 to 4. I'm sorry, 2 to 7. Leopold, old, beat up. Yeah, with
Doesn't
a
bother you?
see-through sight. Never ever.
Fresh snow days, 4 inches
No.
of snow.
No, I shot. What was it, the one in back of the house that pretty near run me over there? I shot him through the scope, and yeah, I don't know. I guess it all started over in Adamstown, just outside of Rangeley, and I was running just an open blade sight, and there was a buck probably 200 yards away, and I had gun enough to get to him, but I was plunking shots out there, and he just kind of walked off. And the next year, I threw a cheap Bushnell on for $56 from Walmart, and when I pulled up and placed a shot and walked up to the deer that I had shot, it was where I had aimed. So I kind of switched to that, but I don't know. I'm just one of them anal guys that when I pull up, I like to know where it's hitting. But every buck I've shot, most of them, I guess I never really aim for a particular spot. I'm always that center mass guy, no matter what angle he is.
Right.
I'm looking at that center mass shot, right? That's an old Marine Corps thing.
that's right.
And that's why when people say, oh, I missed a bear, or I tried to get him behind the shoulders, and no, I don't care which way that animal's standing. I'm going for the center. And I'm not going to stop shooting until it's dead or dying.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I feel that way too. You know, you see guys will take one shot and you know, wait for it to go off, and I just
We've
through
seen
different
it.
experiences. I sling the lead until it's on the ground. And
We've seen it. I know Hal's seen it. I've seen it when I was guiding for Hal. It's you get these guys that that shoot with a Win Mag, and it's one shot, and they pull the gun down, and the moose is standing there, and they look at you and say that moose is dead, and then you spend the next 6 hours looking for a wounded moose that you never get.
Yeah.
You know.
I've watched guys before deer hunting, guiding them. I've actually had to tell them to rack another shell in. They shoot, and then they stand there. Don't even think to rack another shell in, But that boils down to inexperience, really. That's
right.
That's the key. Most people, they don't. For one thing, the big woods hunting is totally different when you're hunting in the woods. I don't care if you could be down south in that bigger woods or in the Midwest or anywheres, but it's just a totally different. You don't have, you're lucky to see a buck, let alone for very long, down in through the woods and stuff. So you got to be able to get some shots off, and you got to be able to pick openings between trees and everything else, and you can't be waiting for the perfect shot. A lot of people, you see on the TV shows, there's a blade of grass in the way. They got to wait till the blade of grass is not the way. But, I'm going to tell you, you'd never shoot a buck up here if you was waiting on something like that,
How about that perfect quarter and away shot?
Oh, you don't wait for that every time? Well,
yeah.
We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to touch on expand on the scope discussion a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because that is, the everyone's got their personal preferences and your personal thing, but it definitely
You'll never. It's something the debate you'll never end.
No, it's the Ford Chevy, Dodge thing. It all goes back to whatever you're comfortable with, whatever works for you, use it.
All right. We'll be back.
Hey everyone, it's Hal here. Just wanted to let you know about the Big Woods Hunting Club. You can sign up for it at bigwoodsbucks.com and go to the club logo, and there's a lot of cool features in there. That part of the site is going to be where all of my stuff lives, my videos, short films, video tips, articles, all that stuff is going to be in the membership side of the site. Another good feature about the site would be the forum. That's going to be a place for you people to communicate with each other. You're tired of getting harassed on Facebook or get to Facebook jail or anything like that. This will be a place you can talk about hunting, talk about guns, whatever you want to talk about on the forum. And we also have a question of the month in there, and we'll be answering that question. I'll answer that at the end of every month. Somebody will win a sticker for that for their truck. And we'll also read these here on the podcast, and me and Joe and Lee will have a little fun with answering the question, the three of us on the podcast. Hey, welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion about guns, and we left it off on the scope thing, and we were saying it's really just a personal choice. If you can get used to using a scope and you're happy with it, that's great. You know what I mean? We're not trying to convert people here, and I've used both, but it's kind of funny. When I first started carrying the 7600 was back in I bought my first one in 1987, I think. 1987. And then I said, well, I'm going to get another one, and I'm going to put a scope on it. So I bought one in 88, so I had two. So I carried one on the fair weather days, the one with the scope, and then on the foul weather days, I carried the peep sight. And I did that for probably, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I never shot a buck with the one with the scope. I shot every one of them with a peep sight. And part of that's probably because you more tend to get a buck on a foul weather day, especially if you're tracking or something. But I never shot one, so I took the scope off and I gave it to my son, put a peep sight on it and gave it to my son when he got old enough for one.
Yeah, for me it was part of the scope debate for me was because of my eyesight, and I wanted it. It acted like a pair of binoculars if I needed it, I guess, and I could use it to look out through the woods. And it was always a low power scope, usually never over 7 power. But the snow thing always got me, just constantly fighting, keeping the snow out and keeping the water off of it. And
I think a part of that though is we talked last week about clothing and how to adjust your body heat and how some people sweat more than others, and that's part of it too, because if you don't sweat causes your scope to fog up too. If you're cradling your gun or something against your body, it can cause that sweat, and then it can freeze on and everything else. But Lee's in such good shape, he don't sweat anyway. So that's probably why you don't have to worry
Peak
about
condition.
it.
Hey,
Peak condition.
if round is a shape, I'm in it.
Yeah, but it's for me, I've gotten used to the peep sight now. I love it, but I still have to carry a pair of binoculars. I'll carry them underneath my jacket, where if I need something, because man, there's nothing worse than needing binoculars. You see something across the hardwoods, it might be something, and you want to take a look. And
I went a few years in between times with no scope and no binoculars, and then I started carrying them about probably the mid-90s, and I always do now. I always carry them with me. But
you carry them underneath your jacket?
Yeah, inside my jacket, yeah. And then I've got this thing I really like. It's like a little neoprene cover for it, so I don't have caps on them. It's in a little cover, and it holds it against my chest, and I just pull them out from that. I may go days and never take them out, but they're always there.
Right.
Like you said, I mean, sometimes you just see a little brown spot that's out of place, way off or something, but you got to look at it, And
speaking of way off, and you and I have talked about this before, one of the things that kept me from committing completely to the peep sight was what happens if there's that, there's a buck across a clear cut and I've got to make a 250-yard shot. And I still contend you're at that point, you have no choice but to aim for center mass. In fact, you can't even narrow it down to that because your peep sight is covering the animal up completely, basically, And I remember watching videos and there was respected guys that were talking about shooting deer at 300 yards with open sights. I know that people do it. I know it can be done, but I mean, I basically boiled it down to the fact that most shots are under 100 yards in the woods, so I don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, Lee's got the other solution that he mentioned, the see-through mount, right?
I run that 2-7 with a see-through mount on it.
You do use a see-through mount?
Absolutely, and I practice with it. Yeah, I run a box of shells through that gun every year before I start with stupid things like you hear about guys that put paper over a tire and have their friends send it down a hill while they shoot at it. That's a stupid story.
Hey, whoa.
I do that.
Slow your roll.
I think it's a great technique, but it all goes back to what works for you. And that scope I don't wear binoculars. Moose season I do, but I don't while I'm deer hunting. But just fortunately it hasn't screwed me.
Where do you zero your scope in at if you're using the see-through? Because it's so far. I always never liked them because it's so far off. Well, two reasons. Number one, it's so far off the barrel that you've got to know where it's consciously know where it's sighted in at. I guess when you're shooting. But the other thing is in the heat of the moment, when the deer takes off, I always thought it would be easy to scope or peep, and which one to go for. It was always easier just to have one choice to me and go with it.
I don't know. None of that even really clicks anymore with that gun. That.
Have you shot deer with the peep before?
Nope, never had to. Always it's hard to explain. Hal knows, and when you get close, you can feel it. Like something's. Even if it doesn't happen, you walk into a thicket and you're like, okay, this is a time that I want to look down and just check the end of that scope, make sure everything's good before I walk in here.
Right.
And if you don't, then you're just being an idiot anyways. So you're kind of at the mercy of whatever God gives you. But if you're prepared when you get to those situations, then it should work out good. But I shot him at 10 feet and I didn't see nothing but brown,
So 10 feet using the scope. So you just pull up.
I don't know what I was looking at,
right.
Joe. I could have been looking right over it. But I can tell you, he was moving and I was pulling the trigger and it worked out good. But it's all experience and luck.
Yeah, it's I still, if I tree stand hunt, I know Hal loves talking tree stand hunting.
Yeah, we're going to have an episode on that.
If I'm sitting in a tree, I'll have my trusty old Browning semi-auto with a scope on it, and I love it. There's something about when you're walking all day, when you can just wrap your hand around, the 7600, and it's small and easy, and you can throw it around, especially the carbine. to me is one of the big advantages of it.
Yeah, I do like it. I carried it a little bit last year, and I do like it. I worry about that. You get into one of these big chops, and the buck's standing on the other end, and you're like, son of a gun. I'm just going to throw something out there.
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of people mention that. I just like the scope because just in case. Well, I'm going to tell you, you're more likely to lose a buck in close by having a scope than you are to lose one at a distance. It's just a reality. Is it's so rare that you're going to see one fire off that often. I mean, I know what happens, and I know there's guys in some places, especially not so much now, but when there used to be a lot more clear cuts, a lot of guys would hunt around them clear cuts, and they would get a longer shot. But I'll tell you, more often than not, you're going to have your close shot.
What's the longest that you have shot with a peep that you can remember, and how far would you shoot? Or would you feel comfortable shooting, do you think?
The furthest one I've ever shot was 120 paces in the woods running. I've never shot one beyond that, and I've hunted Ontario where there was clear cuts and everything. I've never that was in Maine, and that's the furthest one. And I never had a chance at one, like I saw standing across the clear cut. I've never seen that in almost 40 years up here. I did shoot at one running across. He jumped up in front of me. I didn't realize he was that close. I was thinking he got with a doe. I got on his track, and I hadn't gone quarter of a mile on it, and he got with a doe. And I'm thinking all the time, I'm looking up at this green bluff up on the top of the peak, and I'm like, yeah, they're right up there. Because I was in this, it's kind of a plantation, like a spruce plantation in a clear cut that all the spruces were like, head high or more, 8 feet tall. They were laying right in that. And no one got in there, and I just looked down, and I could see where he was thrashing his horns around some willows, so I stopped. I heard some rustling, and they got up, and they were 30 yards from me. And all I could see, I'd see that buck. It reminded me of a shooting gallery at a fair, because that buck would jump through between two of them spruce trees, so I'd swing ahead, and he wouldn't come into the open, and he'd come into another open and back to the right. It was like he was zigzagging up through them spruces, and I kept boom, boom. Every time I think he was going to hit an opening, I'd shoot, and he never did. And finally, he got across he disappeared, and I stepped up on a stump, and I was watching, and both of them were across the cut when I saw them again. It went up on a hill, and they come into view clear across that cut. It was a good 200 yards. And I poked another one at him out there running at 200 yards, and I didn't cut a hair. I didn't think I would at that distance running. But anyways, that's the furthest chance I ever had,
Yep.
But, so I figure if I've gone that long and it's never not having a scope's never been a disadvantage, I guess I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I think you got pretty good odds.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, you see, for qualifying and things in the military, they're shooting open sights at
500 yards.
Yeah.
Well, we used to have to qualify. We used to take, 10? It was 10 shots at 200 offhand, right, Lee?
Yeah, I don't remember, but I just remember looking out there. You had to look at the guys telling you whether the red dot was hit and the white dot was missed. You had to look at that as spotters. You had to look for that with binoculars, but they wanted you to shoot with your bare eye in an open sight,
Yeah, we used to hit offhand at 200. It was a 6-inch bullseye we were shooting at, offhand 200. And then the 500-yard target we used to shoot, well, they called it the dog target. It was like you see the police use. It's like a shape of a man's shoulders and then head. And that was 12 inches wide, and with the head part of it was 18 inches tall. And that was the bullseye at 500 yards with a peep sight.
Do you cover your target with the peep, or do you put your target on top of the peep?
Well, I cover it now. In the Marine Corps, they taught us, because it wasn't it was a peep, but it was a blade post. So you used the top of the blade. It was flat. It wasn't a bead really. It was a post. But on most rifles have a bead. Some of them still have a blade, but most of them have a bead.
Right.
And I cover mine because, and I know guys that do still use a 6 o'clock hole. They shoot off the top of the bead, but for me it was always just a natural thing to cover the bead on where I wanted to hit. So, and it covers a pretty good. I use the original bead on my 7600, the one that come on it. I just paint it fluorescent orange with the nail polish.
Yep.
And that covers at 50 yards about 4 inches, maybe 5. It covers that size of a bull. So if I'm just going to check it down the range, I just completely blank out that bullseye, and they'll be all right there in the middle of it, an inch or two apart.
Yep.
Yeah, but I block it out. Now we're going to talk a little bit about ammo and ammo choices, and we know this is going to be a hot topic.
Oh, always a lot of debate on ammo.
Lively.
I know. I'll say right off the bat, I changed just from, what you were telling me with the what you like to shoot with the Remington.
Oh, yeah.
The old round heads.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. In a lot of this stuff, we're talking about the guns, but also with the ammo. A lot of stuff is really regional. It's almost like, I don't want to call it a fad, but you get into some areas of the country and everybody kind of is leaning towards either one brand or one model. Like lever actions are real popular out west. Yeah, cowboy action, and all that. And but New England, from Pennsylvania up, seems to be, a lot of 7600 carbine or 7600 country, some levers, both. But the ammo, I think, traditionally, back years ago, even when I started hunting, there wasn't a lot of brands. You had your Remington, you had your Winchester ammo. I don't remember if Federal was around back then. Yeah, it must have been, when I was a kid, because we bought Federal shotgun shells. But there wasn't a lot of choices. And I remember from the time I was a kid, my father always used Remington core lock bullets. Seemed like everybody did. And back then, quite frankly, most of the bullets were round nose. The pointed bullets didn't really start getting popular until, some time after that. I think, I'm talking back in the early 60s, and during the 60s. But so I've just always used those core locks. And the round nose, you can still get, the core locks come in all kinds. You get every caliber and bullet weight. But I've stuck with a round nose, and in my .6, I shoot the .6, and I use the 180 grain round nose soft points. And
do you think there's something, hunting in the big woods up here, it all comes down to, wanting something that if there's a small twig or something that, because you always have to shoot through something, or a lot of the time anyway, you don't get the perfect shot. And so visually, I always thought that the core lock round point were better for going through. If they did hit something, they wouldn't be as susceptible to deflecting as the PSP, the pointed soft point.
Yeah, that's a lot of debate on that too. I know there's guys that's done studies on it, shooting through little dowels and stuff. And really, I read one study years ago, and the guy couldn't prove one way or the other what was better. And then other people say it's a slower bullet doesn't deflect as much. Well, I disagree with that because, now that we hunt a lot with muzzle loaders, and that's getting more popular, they're about the most deflective bullet you can have, and that's just kind of a slow-moving, short, fat bullet, and those things deflect horrendously. But I've shot a lot of brush, I'm going to tell you that, but I've shot through a lot of stuff in gut deer, and I've never wounded a buck. When I shoot at them, and I can call where I hit because it's just when I'm shooting, it's like I always relate it to when I pull the trigger, it's like taking a photograph with a camera. It's like click, and that clicked in my mind where that bead was when the gun went off. Because when they're moving, you ain't going to have necessarily exactly in the center of the shoulder, And, I'll say, oh, that was a couple inches low, or that was a little far back, or a little high. I always know where it hits. And but I've never lost one, and I've never had one go.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah,
that is. That's
and it's not everybody. You know what I mean? Most people think that guy's crazy, but the experience. If you go shoot those rolling tires enough, right, you're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's just part of practice. But
it's practice, and then there's natural ability that comes in there too. It's like, no matter how much you practice, not everyone can be an NBA player.
How many times have you been with
so-
a client, had a buck jump up in front of you and take off, and the guy never even pulls the trigger, and you're thinking,
You just
boom,
lock right
boom, boom.
Yeah.
And they look at him and say, what happened? Oh, geez, I didn't have time. And in my mind, I'm like,
Yeah.
I didn't have seen that happen.
That was 3 good opportunities right there, buddy, in 2.5, 3 seconds. So,
Yeah, but I know I've shot a lot of trees and a lot of brush too. I've shot at bucks before, and I don't. If anybody said they ever got every one they shot at, they ain't hunted much. You know what I mean? So when they're moving through the woods, you're probably going to hit some stuff. I try to pick the biggest openings and go, and I see a lot of bark scun off trees. I've hit spruce trees, and I've hit everything else. When you're swinging, sometimes you pick the biggest openings, and then you hit a 4-inch tree that you didn't see because you were looking at a bunch of 12-inch trees.
Right.
But if you don't shoot, guess what? You're never going to get one. So you got to shoot. So, but I've always had good luck with the round nose, and I'm a creature of habit. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm not trying to find the next best thing that comes down the pipe.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm really not.
180 grain.
Yeah, that's kind of really for an .6 kind of the optimal bullet weight anyways. The 220s don't run good. You can get a 220. Everybody's, geez, well, you'll get the 220s. Well, they don't run good through either the 74 or the 7600, because they're so much longer. You're more apt to have them hang up a little bit. So,
You mean cycling?
Cycling them,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think the 150s are fine, but why would you shoot the 150 when you can shoot a 180? I mean, there's no advantage to go into a lighter bullet in .6. There's no advantage to it.
Right.
Yeah.
It is funny, you're saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And like everything else, technology, is always moving forward and improving, and bullet technology is no different. They're always coming out with different tips and, expand better and everything else. But I always say it's like my bow that I shoot. My bow is 17 years old. Well, when I bought it in 2000, it was the best there was, and it shot great.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that apply now? So that's why I've never changed, and
I think
can still shoot well with it.
I think with all these new bullets, there probably are some bullets that are more, they call it ballistic coefficient, or they'll shoot further or better. But that's all fine and dandy if you're shooting in the open country. The round nose Corlock ain't the best bullet for shooting in the open country. But I think it's the best bullet to shoot in the woods. What do you think, Lee?
Absolutely. I have dozens of boxes of them. Back when we was worried about, I can remember when it wasn't that long ago, went to several gun shops looking for the 180 Corlocks, and they were all sold out. So I put a special order in. I think I've got at least 10 or 12 boxes in the house. One of my fear, you talk about fear in the woods, one of my fear is not having that 180 grain Corlock bullet to shove in my gun,
Yeah, I got the same thing. I had got a case of them, I don't know, 6-8 years, probably 8 years ago now, and I kind of covet them things because you never know how long, I mean, I'm sure they'll always make some of them, but they're not that popular anymore, so it's one of them supply and demand things.
That was my next question. I'm the same way. I have a pile of them, so I haven't bought them in a long time. Are they even that readily available anymore? It seems like everything is the pointed.
You know what? A lot of they're available, but it's up to the gun shops. If they don't sell many, they won't stock them. Is what it comes to. You know what I mean? That's usually what ends up happening. But they make them, and I know Remington will make a run of that ammo, the round nose ammo. They'll seem to do it all in one cycle. So they'll make so many .6 round nose, so many 308, so many 35 Remingtons, maybe 30. No, they always make the 30. The 300 Savage. Maybe they'll do that because when they anytime they make an ammo change, it's a big deal. It's like changing the production line. But I know they'll run 200,000-300,000 rounds, and then when they start to dry up, they'll make another run of them.
Does anyone else? I mean, I always think Remington when I think of the round nose bullet. Does anyone else make a round nose that you know of?
I don't think they do for the
just not enough demand.
They do for like the 30-30s and the ones,
Right.
the tube magazines, the 35s that you have to, but I don't think they do any. I haven't seen any other ones, any other round nose ones. You, Lee?
No, I haven't. I don't even. I said earlier I run a box of shells through my gun every year, but I don't use the 180s. I'll go buy some 150s and send them down.
Right.
Yeah. I've had guys say, well, the 150 ain't going to shoot like the 180. That's close enough.
Yeah, 50 yards is going to shoot the same.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get that, even my rifle, every rifle I've ever bought, I put in a chop saw. I put all my garb on, my wool jackets, whatever I'm wearing that year for clothes, and I'll stand in the living room or outside in the shop, and I'll pull that gun up real slow under my arm, to my shoulder, and whatever hits gets chopped off, and I'll cut that gun stock down until that fits good. Then I'll shape the stock back up and put the butt plate back on, and
that's one way to do it.
yeah, every gun I've ever owned started with a Smith & Wesson 12-gauge shotgun 30-something years ago. Duck hunting. That thing kept coming up and hitting in my armpit, and I went home, took a skill saw and cut 3 inches right off in that. Went hunting the next day, and it was perfect.
Yeah. Well, when you got a 50-inch chest and guns like you got to shorten things up.
Yeah, that's one of the worst things that can happen is that the stock coming up, catching on a vest. We talked about it a little bit on the when we were talking about the jacket, and that is, I've had that happen. If the stock's too long.
Oh, you work so hard. My whole theory with any hunting is you work so hard to get there, and you put so much time in, so much effort and money, that why have something stupid like that screw that shot up?
I do something similar, but I close my eyes and bring it up. I'll close my eyes and bring it up fast and then open them and see where everything's, and just kind of practice like that. And it helps, because I think sometimes if you're thinking about it too much, you don't want to think about it. You want it to be automatic. Hal, probably it's always automatic anyway. So,
yep, everything's an automatic reflex action now. But I just been doing it longer than a lot of people,
Yep.
So for any of you young listeners out there, you'll get there, but you got to just be repetitive and keep at it. Don't switch up guns. You can switch guns to figure out what you like the best. If you maybe you like a lever better than a pump, or maybe you like a semi better, whatever it is. But once you get with a deer rifle, just stick with it. There's really no sense to, if you like it and it works and it fits and everything operates right, just keep using it. I mean, dumb little things too. I always, when it come to muzzleloader season, I've used various ones over the years. And the safeties are always completely different.
Safeties,
they're completely different than my 7600. So, that was a problem. I lost a really nice buck one year. I could have shot it if I had my rifle. It was muzzleloader season, and he got up out of his bed like 25 yards from me, right in the open. He jumped up out of the short furs, but when he jumped up, because he was in the open. And usually if I can get 2 jumps, I can get one into him. Well, this guy had 2 jumps in front of me, but I just took me an extra, whatever it is, split second to think about pulling the hammer back. I had the Thompson Omega I was using, and it's got the hammer on it, so it's just that much different. I lugged a 7600 with a crossbolt safety, and then to go to that, it's amazing. Just that little bit, because I'm not used to it, cost me that really nice buck. I couldn't get the safety back in time. But now I just got another muzzleloader I want to tell you about. You've seen it.
Oh, I want
Joe.
one.
Yeah. And you haven't seen it yet. I should have brought it down for you to look at, Lee.
I'm due for a new one.
Yeah. Well, there's a guy in New Hampshire that makes it's called Woodman Arms. His name's Mark Woodman. He makes his own custom muzzleloader, and he gets a match barrel somewhere out west Montana, I think. But he's got his own design. It's a break action of his own design. He's got a patent on it, and it's got a crossbolt safety like our 7600s.
Really?
Yeah. Same thing, and he made me one. He put a left-handed. He can do it left to right. So I got a left-handed safety in it, crossbolt safety. It weighs 5.5 pounds.
No.
Yeah, it's just like lugging your 7600 around. It's
That
light.
feels good.
And he'll make a peep sight for it, a buckhorn sight, a Picatinny rail, or a scope mount for it. And it's awesome. I've been testing it here about the last, I don't know. Well, they started a month or so ago, and I just shot it again the other day. I wanted to try some. I was using the 777 pellets, and I wanted to try some Blackhorn. And he said he liked the Blackhorn, and I had never shot it, but that was actually pretty cool because one thing I learned about it is you don't have to punch your barrel in between shots. You don't have to worry about that sticky going down the barrel. I shot probably 25 shots the other day, and the last shot went down the barrel just like the first one. It's got some kind of lubricant in that powder. I don't know what it is, and you don't have to clean it with that white juice you use on your black powder. It's you just clean it up with like bore cleaner, like you do on your rifle. But anyways, I shot I put the scope on first. I just wanted to test it, and I cut holes at 50 yards. I was cutting holes with it, and then I just put the peep sight on because I wanted to get it ready. So I put the peep on there, and it's going to be fun to lug that because it's a muzzle loader, but it feels like it carries, and it just feels like I have my 7600.
So it's a crossbolt safety, but is it in front of the trigger or behind?
It's behind. It's the same exactly. Yeah. It's just like the safety on a 7600.
Because that's a problem I've had one time is if you get used to it behind, it might be a crossbolt, but a lot of times they'll be in front of the trigger guard.
Winchesters, like the shotguns.
Right.
Or they're in front, yeah.
And I sat there pressing the hell out of that trigger guard. Yeah. Never turned the safety off. You're just used to it, you know.
I got a 20 gauge pump shotgun I can't even use because I can never think the safety's on the wrong side of the trigger for me. So rabbit runs
makes a
out.
Difference.
Trying to push the safety in the rabbit.
Is that a Winchester?
That's an old Sears and Roebuck. My dad got.
Oh, yeah. I wonder who made them. Winchester might have made them. Sears didn't make their own guns.
And you really throw a monkey wrench in and go to a tang with your thumb, and it's like, you know, and that goes back to just being comfortable with whatever you're using, you know, and making it second nature.
Right. That was my point on it. You know, whatever you're going to use, don't switch up guns. I've had guys come up, they show up for a hunt, and they got two different guns. Well, I'm going to use this one this day and this one that day, and I'm like, pick one gun and use that gun. And boy, it can really cost you if you're not familiar with it. And I made a mistake one time. I remember I was guiding a young guy up in remote camp, and he was actually a friend of mine. He had bought my boat, my lobster boat, when I got out of that, but really nice kid. But anyways, he was using he had a scope. His wife had bought him a rifle with a scope. I don't remember what kind it was. And then it was a foul weather most of the week there, and he asked Mike Featherstone, you know, Mike was in camp there, and he asked him if he could use I think he actually had might have been a Winchester bolt with a peep sight on it, though. And he said, my scope's always screwed up. He said, can I use that rifle, Mike? And he said, Mike goes, yeah, I don't care. So I should have said no. I should have told him just use your own rifle. But the next day we get out there, and we'd had the little snow, and it was melting off, and I followed this buck. It was only patches of snow, but it just melted so you could see the puncheons in the leaves. And I followed him out of this swale up over a big ridge and down the other side. And then he got into this spruce knob, and I had to work it out. It took me a little bit, but I finally figured out where he come out. And we eased over, and there was a hardwood bowl down there. And that buck is standing down there about 100 yards, just standing there broadside. And he pulls up on that thing, and ka-wow. The thing just walked ahead. It was with a doe. Didn't even know he was around. And the thing just walked off, you know. And I'm like, oh. If he'd had his gun with his scope, he'd have probably dropped it right there, you know. Nice big buck, too.
Yeah, I had a similar story to that. I went out to Saskatchewan a couple of years ago with some friends, and I brought my semi-auto Browning, you know, the one I was comfortable with. Well, we had real cold weather that week. It was 5, 10 below pretty much every day. And the whole time, everyone's telling me I should have brought a bolt action because my semi-auto is going to, you know, it's cold and it won't cycle right. And so now it's in my head, you know. I'm thinking about what everyone's telling me. So one of the guys on the trip, a buddy of mine, he tagged out. And the night before the next hunt, he says, geez, Joe, he says, you could use my bolt action, Old Faithful. You know, I've shot so many deer with this gun. So I'm thinking about it. I'm like, you know, bolt action can't go wrong, you know. It's not going to jam up. What if I lose a deer because So I take the here. I'm gonna get it all ready for you. It's gonna be. So he cleans it and gets it all good to go for me. So I'm in the stand the next day, and beautiful buck, 150 something inch deer comes out, and it was a fairly easy shot. And he stops and kind of looks toward my way, but hadn't made me, and I settle the scope on him and squeeze the trigger, click. And now he's looking right at me. So I slowly cycle another round in, and he starts going away, and he's getting a little bit nervous, and I put it on him, click. And now I'm really getting, because the only thought going through my mind at this point is not I have to kill this deer. It's if I only had my gun, it would be dead. And about the time I cycle another round in, and a third time, he was getting ready to bolt, and he was getting out of range, and I fired and put a good shot on him and killed him. And what it was is my friend was so nice to clean the gun for me. He used like 3-in-1 oil or something,
Yeah.
and it froze the firing pin up.
I have that same story.
Well, this is how you learn, Lee, is you have it
same
happen
story.
to you.
It's like it had to be 20 below zero, end of November, just a wicked cold day. And there had been this big 10-pointer running around in this neck of woods that I used to hunt a lot. And a couple of guys had told me about it. Nobody wanted to hunt that morning because it was no snow, leaves on the ground, swelled up leaves too, frozen, like walking on potato chips.
Oh, that's my favorite.
So I says, I got a spot I can go. So I jump right in this brook, Breakneck Brook it's called. I jump right in that brook, and I start walking down that brook. And I'm going to hunt that brook for 2 miles, because you can't really walk much in the woods. I don't go down that brook 200 yards, and there's a 10-pointer mounting a doe, and he's putting a boots right to her. And I had that Model 700.
He's putting the boots to her.
That I had worried about it being cold, so I had taken it apart, put the 3-in-1 oil to it, put it all back together, and that firing pin would not go ahead hard enough to fire that primer. And at the end of it, I've got the gun inside my jacket, blowing on it. And I look over, and the
sounded just like that buck that was putting the boots to her.
The deer's looking at me like, I hope he doesn't figure that out before I get done. He does his business, and finally he's walking off looking at me like, I got you. And I pull up, and I squeeze as hard as I can, and it left just a little dent in the primer, but not enough to go off. I didn't end up killing him 3 days later, but we ended up killing him 3 days later, and we called him Basketball because he had a rack of horns that came right around within almost an inch in the front and touched, and it was a perfect basketball hoop shape. It was just a perfect 10-pointer.
Yeah.
And that bolt action got retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's after that happened, and of course we were all laughing and talking about it that night. And the guy that dropped me off there at the stand said, it was really cold. I meant to say you ought to dry fire that gun 4 or 5 times before you get in the stand. I said, oh, thanks. I'll remember that next time.
Them bolt action guys should remember that, because that's probably a good trick. I never thought of it.
Yeah,
well,
I never put any oil in my bolt at all. I spray it on the outside of the bolt.
I don't anymore
where the
either.
bolt lugs. I never spray oil down inside you where your firing pin comes out. None of you don't need to, because those internal parts of that bolt are stainless anyways. That's not going to rust in there. You don't have to worry about that. I just even when I clean it up at the end of the year, I still don't do it, And you can spray if you think you got some crap in there or whatever. You get that gun scrubber there and scrub it out, because that evaporates, kind of like brake cleaner. It evaporates off, and then. But yeah, oil and cold weather don't mix.
No.
All right, we'll take a break and come back. Talk a little bit about it goes along with the guns, slings. It's not a big topic, and it is.
Whoa, we're bound to have some stories.
It is a topic. It's one of those little details that everyone has an opinion on. So we'll be back.
Hey everyone, it's Hal here. Just wanted to let you know about the Big Woods Hunting Club. You can sign up for it at bigwoodsbucks.com and go to the club logo, and there's a lot of cool features in there. That part of the site is going to be where all of my stuff, lives. My videos, short films, video tips, articles, all that stuff is going to be in the membership side of the site. Another good feature about the site would be the forum. That's going to be a place for you people to communicate with each other. You're tired of getting harassed on Facebook or get to Facebook jail or anything like that. This will be a place you can talk about hunting, talk about guns, whatever you want to talk about on the forum. And we also have a question of the month in there, and we'll be answering that question. I'll answer that at the end of every month. Somebody will win a sticker for that, for their truck. And we'll also read these here on the podcast, and me and Joe and Lee will have a little fun with answering the question, the three of us on the podcast. Hey, welcome back. We were talking on break there, and Lee said he's got some special sling story to tell you.
No, I said
He said
I have
stupid
a
story.
stupid.
Oh, a stupid.
sling story. Sometimes I hope, in the back of my head, I'm telling these stories, and I'm thinking, I hope that client's not listening to this story, 'cause I would never
they
say a
all
name,
are.
but they're like, yeah, oh, that was me.
Yeah, well, it happened.
But the topic of slings is up, and do you sling or don't you sling? That's the question. And I don't sling personally. Do you sling, Hal?
I don't sling and never have. Well, for deer hunting, if I'm elk hunting or something like that, it's different. But for deer
So you're not a
hunting,
slinger.
I'm not a slinger, no. Joe?
I do have a sling on my gun, and the reason I do, I never have it on my shoulder when I'm hunting ever. The only reason I have it is for dragging out, because it's more convenient.
Well, there's two reasons you have it: for dragging out and catching in the brush.
Yeah, well, that too, because that does happen.
Well, yeah.
But no, sometimes and I've taken it off and just thrown it in my fanny pack, and
Yeah, that's a good place for it. I
Yep.
used to tell my hunters that get your sling off and put it in your pack, and then we'll be able to use it when we drag your buck out.
yeah,
Because if you leave it on, you're probably not going to get a buck. And it seems like kind of a dumb statement to say that, but I've seen so many guys with a sling that they're walking through the brush and it grabs onto a stick and snaps it. And if that happens at the wrong time, you're done, Buck's gone, game over. So it's just one more thing to make noise in the woods. And I'm not saying, I know there's probably a lot of guys that hunt the big woods that use them. And I remember seeing that when I read Larry's book there, how they carry them. But they do carry them different. They sling their guns, carry them barrel down where it's not going to catch. But a guy would, they've practiced that enough where they could be proficient at shooting and proved it. But it is one way to do it if you're going to carry a sling. But just to carry your gun in your hand with a sling lapping down there in a big loop, that doesn't work. And there's no reason to have it on your shoulder. If you've got a gun slinged on your shoulder in the woods, you're not ready to shoot.
Oh, how many deer have been missed over the years from
people trying to
Well,
yank
that leads into the stupid story.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
let's hear it, Lee.
So, client again.
And it's always a client. Are we
Oh,
sure this
this-
isn't happening to Lee?
You talk about clients in your history. This client didn't speak 100 words all week. It was a very quiet person. He's a young fella in his 30s then, probably 45 now, but that guy had 3 opportunities in 1 week to kill big bucks. And that, to me, is a personal goal because that has never happened before that, and it's never happened after that, but for a client. But second buck story was we had walked in close to 3.5 miles. If we take that first right on the Gorham Gore Road there. Anyways, we get in there and
Hey,
there's
what are you talking about?
yeah, Gorham, New Hampshire. So we walk in there and we start at dark. We get in there about daylight, and it was right on the border. And I told him, I says, there's an old deer run that comes right down through this big chopping. And ever since they chop it, it gets less use now, but there's still a pretty good run. And I look up and there's a doe standing in the middle of this chopping. And I look at him and I said, get your gun ready. And the doe turns and looks behind her. And I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking. And she's looking right at that corner of that cut where that trail comes out. And I said, get ready, get ready. And this buck sticks his head out of the woods, and I says, get ready, and he starts running towards the doe, running, and like he's just coming after her. Well, he disappears behind this little knoll in the chopping, and I said, as soon as he comes out of that knoll, you shoot. I'm still not looking at my client. I'm looking at the deer. The buck comes out behind the knoll, takes 3 good jumps right out in the wide open, and disappears down into this ravine. And I turn around and look, and I says, what happened? And his gun is slung on his shoulder.
Never took it off.
Never took it off.
Wow.
And I'm like, what was that? He goes, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. You know?
Yeah.
Well, you should have taken a picture of him right there.
Oh, it was just, so then that was when I was polite and took the sling off and his gun and stuck it in my backpack and said, I'll give it back to you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But we're done, you know. But and that same week, the very first day, same thing up on a particular mountain that we like to hunt. Buck's laying underneath the spruce tree, just laying there. And I'm like, shoot, shoot, shoot. The buck stands up, shakes like a dog. The guy's fiddle farting, pulls his gun off his shoulder, drops it, picks it back up, gets one shot at the buck as it's running away, hits a tree.
Yeah, I would say if you are, I guess there'd be a situation if you got a sling in your gun and you're walking a road at the end of the day back to the truck or whatever. If you are in a situation that you're still hunting and the gun's on your shoulder,
Yeah, no,
I found
hunting.
it's true. If you're in a situation where you can legally kill a deer and you got the gun on your shoulder,
Right.
it is always easier, I found, to grab it by the just above the stalk and sling it underneath, like Hal was saying. I think the Benoits have shown. It comes around a lot quicker than trying to pull a gun off your shoulder with your thumb.
Yeah.
It's just a mess.
That was early in my guiding career too. So after that, they'd show up with a sling, and I'd just politely say, "This is going to be an obstacle. It's going to be more of a hindrance than it is a help. So we'll just leave this on the table for the week."
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the type of gun you have, because you got to know that carrying around a bolt action rifle with a big scope on it and everything else is a lot harder than carrying around a 7600 with peep sights on it. If you got a heavy gun, you're more likely to throw it up and take a break and, we're not going to see anything here, and carry it on your shoulder than if you don't have a sling at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is, I don't even own one right now. I don't think I have one in my house.
No.
No.
That's quite a testament.
No.
Yeah. I carry in my pack, I just have a short piece of like 1/4-inch braided nylon with a loop on each end, and if I got to drag one out, I just loop it around the pistol grip and around the barrel and sling it over my back, put it right over my back and use it that way. I don't need to carry a regular sling for that, just a piece of rope,
You don't use your gun like a stick and tie the rope to the gun.
When I drag, I use my gun as a goal. Like, I'll walk ahead 100 yards and I'll lean it against the tree and I'll walk back and I'll grab the deer and I'll say, all right, I got to make it to the gun. And I make it to the gun, I drop the deer and I take the gun, go another 100 yards. And
leapfrogging, that's what I call it.
It takes a while, but
that's
it's
another
a goal.
good topic, is dragging deer. That could take up a whole show.
Yeah. I got a chapter in my first book about that, getting them out, because it isn't like, people in most areas, they're in the back 40 wood lot and they go out and get their 4-wheeler and throw them on the back rack and get them out. And I mean, it's funny, we've all had them clients that, most of them come from somewhere where it's more woodlot hunting, and you get back in the woods a couple miles and they're like, well, how we ever get one out of here? And I'm like, hey, don't worry about that. Let's get one, then we'll worry about it afterwards,
Right.
I never gave it a thought. I'm always, if I'm hunting, by myself, I'm always thinking along the way how I would go. I'm never worried about, geez, I guess I can't go any further. I won't get them out. I'm just always thinking, well, I'm over here. I could probably bring them out that way. I'm always kind of mindful of that, the best way to maybe get out afterwards. But some people don't realize that. I know you see the pictures of the guys in the Adirondacks. They was was kind of like the popular thing to do over there was a lot of the guys would carry the whole deer right on their back, and I always looked at that and like, boy, that'd be quite a feat. And then I realized most of them bucks weigh 150 pounds, so it ain't that much of a job. But you ain't going to take one that weighs 250 and throw it over your shoulders and get anywhere.
I've had them. I couldn't get in the back of the truck by myself.
Oh, yeah.
Just big bag of Jello.
Yeah.
Oh, wait till you see Hal's video from last year. That was entertaining in itself.
Yeah, that's the club side of the site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing. I mean, guiding moose hunts is everyone worries about that, and I mean moose are a little tougher than a deer sometimes, but never worry about it. You hunt, get it on the ground, and if maybe you got to pack it out, maybe you got to winch it for half a mile, whatever, but got to get it on the ground first.
Yeah, when I was in the Adirondacks, and the one thing is about that is just the nature of that. It's a state park, and most of the places there's no. It's just walk in only. There's no trails, there's no ATV, so wherever you are in there, and you can be miles and miles back, you got to get them out on your own, somehow. So I had shot one back. It was 1.84 miles by GPS, so up over them ridges it was probably 2.5 miles, But I just quartered him and packed him out. I actually didn't quarter. I actually boned the meat and put it all in plastic bags, put it on my pack frame, and packed it out. I figured it was about 80-pound pack. I had the cape and stuff.
There's so much emphasis put on body weight up in our neck of the woods up here. It would be a tough thing to do, especially with a really big buck. I think I would do anything I had to do to drag him out before I would pack one up here.
Oh, yeah.
Just because you want to get it on the scale,
Yeah.
and
Could always leave.
And there's always roads up here now. There's always roads close enough where it's never going to be.
Oh yeah, you're always within a couple miles of something usually, and a couple miles is a long ways to drag, but it's not undoable.
You ever take a sled in to get one out, a snowmobile?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got a couple.
Sled, airplane.
Yeah, airplane. We brought one out with an airplane once. It was back over the back side of a mountain, and I had Steve Coleman come in. We put it on the pontoon. He flew it back over the mountain to camp on the lake there. Yeah, snowmobile. I've got a couple of them out by snowmobile, like during muzzleloader season.
Yeah.
And whatever you got to do to get them out.
Snowmobiles are nice.
Yeah, we did take me and Mike Featherstone was hunting together. We used to do that quite a bit. Muzzleloader season when we were guiding together back in remote camp, and we'd hunt muzzleloader season, the two of us. And he'd shot a buck on the back side of a mountain there, and it was way back in. And we're thinking to each other, it was one of them places like most of the ways out was uphill. And there was one drainage coming down there, but it was probably the furthest way to go but it was level or downhill most of the way. So we ended up, the time he killed the buck, he'd hit it, and he killed it. It was like an hour before dark. And we had all we could do. I mean, we was about pitch black when we got back to the truck. And we actually had to go in a different way to get it. We figured we'd go in a different way closer. And we took my four-wheeler back in, let's see, that would have been 4 miles probably, back in by four-wheeler. And then we walked back in. We took one of those roll-up plastic things there, they make. And we lugged that back in there. And we dragged him down on that plastic sled for probably a mile. And then we got to the four-wheeler and got him out. We were all day. We left in the morning, and it was getting pretty time we got back to town. It was pretty near dark again, But that's the reward. You get your buck, and so what if it takes you a day to get him out?
Right.
No, you always love looking back at it when it's laying there. Every time you turn around, like what Lee was saying, you get to the get to the gun, you take a rest, and you stand there and look at it for a minute and
it's
admire it. And
it's almost like a relief, You hunt, you're hoping you're going to get your chance, but you never know if you are, and then it's like a weight off your shoulders, and you, like you said, you can keep looking at them. Or if you're by yourself dragging, I would always, like Lee said, you leapfrogging, you pull him ahead. And if you got to take a rest, you just sit down on him and you look at his horn. You kind of admire him a little bit, and then you pick it up and go. It's kind of, it's hard to explain to people that haven't done it, but it's just a neat thing to do. It's just if you're by yourself and you're doing that, and you got a lot of time to reminisce, and just think about things.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that's a good point. You know, a lot of people dread how are we going to get it out of here, but it is one of the it's a good part of it. It's one of the most rewarding parts of the hunt, and
Right.
It's ritualistic almost.
The pressure's off.
Yeah, I guarantee you one thing: you shoot a 200-pound buck back in the woods somewheres, you ain't got to worry about getting it out by yourself if you can't, because when you get back to camp, there's going to be somebody that wants to go in and drag a 200-pound buck out.
Everybody.
It is true.
Everybody.
Yeah,
Yep.
pretty easy to round up a posse to get one of them out.
Yep.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
And the next thing we kind of had here we want to talk about that goes hand in hand with all the topics today is shot placement. And
right in the center, right, Lee?
Center mass.
Center mass.
That's not always true. I mean, that's what I strive for, but I've shot them wherever I could see a piece of brown sometimes just because that's all I could see. And I hoped it was center mass, but you get up there and it wasn't. But, in our particular case, we hunt generally on snow or we're pretty good trackers anyway. So what's the old saying? If you can get them leaking, I can find them.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people won't relate to that either because they're so used to, I don't know.
The double lung.
Yeah, the double lung or whatever. And I don't aim for that. I don't like that shot.
I don't. I'd rather take that shoulder bone and all the shrapnel I can and send that right through them.
That's right. If you lose 2 pounds of shoulder meat, who cares? You got
it was hamburger anyways.
Yeah.
Your little saying there, if you can get them leaking, you can find them.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a story number of years back. We were driving into a place, and it was the middle of the day. We were going in, and there was 3 of us, and we were all gonna get out and head out from there. And we're going down the road, and a buddy of mine sees a doe bedded down up off the side of the road, and he said, "Stop the truck. Maybe there's a buck laying there around there with her somewhere." So we stopped the truck, and he gets out, and sure enough, the doe stands up and starts to go, and right behind that was the buck that we hadn't seen, and he gets up. Well, my buddy fired off a few shots. It was running broadside, and it was, 80 or 100 yards or something, and he fired 3 or 4 times, and the buck was kind of lunging through the snow, and it kind of looked like he was going down, like he was having a hard time, but he really wasn't. He was just getting out of there, and so he stopped shooting and didn't think he had to fire anymore. It was a dead deer, so we go up and look around, and there's a couple drops of blood. Yep, I hit him, Well, the 3 of us, this is when we were just beginning, that we were learning a lot along the way, and
little green.
We were very green. That was the second year that we were tracking up here, and so we tracked that deer. Learned a lot on that hunt, though, because that's how you learn, is by doing it. We tracked him up over the top of a mountain, and it was about dark. We were a good ways back to the truck, and we ended up walking in the dark that night. But we left his track. We had blood the whole time, just little drops here and there. But one of those deals where you thought, oh, he's just going to be laying over the next knob, So we made a plan. We were going to go out that night, come back the next day, get on his track again at the same spot, and run him down. He'd be laying there dead by the next morning. So we get on the track the next morning, and we were probably on it for 2 or 3 hours, and our plan is that because he got into so many other tracks and being new at it was tough deciphering the tracks and figuring it out. So it was my job just to follow the track, and still little specks of blood overnight. I mean, just little bits here and there, and my buddy Chris was behind me, and his job was just to look up ahead and keep looking for him to jump. And my brother, who was also named Chris, was off about 50 yards to my right, and he was keeping us there, and he was doing the same thing, just looking. Well, wouldn't you know, I'm not even looking up because I'm following the track. I hear a gunshot go off with my brother, and I look up, and that buck's running down through the woods, and he piles up after my brother's one shot. And we get up there to him, and it was a beautiful buck. He had like 13-inch G2s. He ended up scoring high 140s. One of the prettiest racks I've ever seen from up here. And
That don't matter. What do you weigh?
He weighed 185.
Small deal. I got you. Small deal.
And so anyway, we get up, and I'll never forget. That's one of those images, that I was the first one up on him, running up on him when he was dying, and he still had his head up and his rack up, and it was kind of swaying back and forth, and seeing that rack and him down on the ground. I mean, it was, we were hollering and high-fiving and everything, so we start looking him over, and we see the one shot. My brother double lunged him running, it was an unbelievable shot, really looking back on it, because it was quite a distance, and he was in a wide open run. But we start looking for where my buddy Chris had hit him the day before, thinking, well, he had to be, somewhere. We finally noticed that the one shot had hit one hoof, his front hoof. We're guessing that his legs were up in front of him when he was lunging through the snow, and his shot was a little bit forward. It was a perfect half a circle where the bullet had hit his hoof, and every time he would step, it would aggravate it and drop a little bit of blood out of his hoof. And that's the only thing that we had to go by. Had it not done that, we would have lost his track hours before, because he was mixed up in so many other deer, but that's how we were able to stay on him.
Yeah, that's a good story.
And it's number one, it taught us all persistence, We said there's so many guys that would have give up on that deer, because it was up over a mountain and down the other side and around, and the fact that we actually got him, the next day, and it was going back to a minute ago, talking about dragging him out and looking back. Oh, that was a good drag out. That was about 1.5 miles, if I remember right, and of course there was 3 of us, so it made it a little bit easier, but that was a good day.
Yeah. So Lee was talking about center mass, and it's kind of an expression, but really what it is you aim for the biggest part. So your heart and your lungs in behind the shoulders. I always, no matter what angle, I do the same thing. I want to center it, get it into the center of that cavity one way or the other. That's what I aim for. So if he's quartering away, obviously you put it a little bit behind. If he's quartering towards you, a little in front of the shoulder. But still, you're trying to get the center of that vital area all the time. Center it top to bottom. I hear guys say 2/3 of the way down or 2/3. Don't think about any of that stuff, because it's too many things to think about in a split second. Just think about the big part and get it centered, and that's where you'll do the best.
Yeah. Who thinks of that? 2/3 of the way down.
Yeah, really. I don't know. Half the time I think people read too much. You don't, it's different if you're going to give, I remember giving, especially moose hunting, clients specific instructions of where to shoot, because they really don't know, you know what I mean? But when you're hunting for yourself, you got to get them vitals, and so you got to get in the center. And the other reason for that is if you do hit a twig and it deflects it a little bit, you still got the biggest part to shoot at. If you're aiming 2/3 down behind the shoulder and it deflects down, well, you probably missed, I always figured by aiming in the middle, you got some room for error there, you know what I mean? If you get a little deflection or something, you got some room there. So
I know it's unpopular too, in up here in the big woods tracking is if a deer's running away from you and that's the only shot you have, I'm taking it, and I'm you got to take every shot you can. And a lot of guys, that's unethical, but you're going to miss a lot of deer up here if you don't take that shot.
What's unethical? You're trying to kill him.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a good shot. That'll drive right up through there and get into the cavity just as well. A lot of people say, you can't shoot him in the hindquarter. The hindquarter is actually a good shot if you do it right, if you know what you're doing. I've shot several of them in the hindquarter, but I try to shoot high and break the hip. They're not going nowhere. The hind end's going to drop down. You're going to go finish them off, and that's it. And that's no different shooting there than it is in the shoulder. You're going to get them. You're going to get them right off.
Had a client kill a moose a couple years back. He fired a bunch, but the only shot hit the femoral artery, and that thing bled out within 100 yards.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just like a murder scene behind it. So,
I had a client shoot a buck like that. We was coming back headed back to remote camp one night, and it was a long yank back. And we used to have to cross this brook in the swale. It was the only good place to get across. And we were coming up by this. There was a signpost there, and so it was kind of neat that we'd cross there in the morning and in the evening, because you'd always get to check to see if anything was around or whatever. But it was bare ground, and I remember it was about Wednesday, or maybe it was Thursday. It might have been Thursday or Wednesday evening, whatever it was, doesn't matter. And again, sometimes he was new at it, so people would tend to get discouraged coming up here because they didn't see the amount of deer they might see where they were from. But we'd seen a few deer, and it was tough going because it was crunchy leaves and bare ground. But we were walking back, and I always told my hunters, I said, it's just 2 points connecting. I always say this: you gotta be in the right place in the woods when the buck is there, and them 2 points connects. And if you do it long enough, them points will connect. So I kept telling him that. And we got across the brook, and we started up this ridge, and it was a pretty good pull, and I'd got ahead of him a little bit. And so I stopped to let him catch up. And when he caught up to me, we just standing there a second, and he said the same thing. He might have said, well, we didn't see anything today. And I said, it's just 2 points connected. And it was like them words just barely left my lips, and I can hear coming in the leaves. And I looked over, and I could see horns coming up over the ridge below us where we just walked, and it was coming from one side. And there was a blowdown there, and I said, "There's one." And what I said was, it happened so quick. I said, "And here comes one now." That's how quick this happened. And he got ready, and it went behind a blowdown. When it come out, it was right below us, right where we just walked, and he was just walking along steady. And I saw what he did. I was just getting ready to just grunt real quick to get him to stop, and the guy fired. And I knew when I had the opening where he fired, he didn't swing with it. And the buck dropped, and I knew he'd hit him in the hind quarter, and he was scrambling down over the hill below us. So I said, hurry up, get down here, and by the time he got down there, I don't know, it wasn't 40 yards. That buck was dead in the doornail. Never had to finish it off. He'd hit that thing right in the femoral artery in the hind quarter, and it didn't live 30 seconds.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is a big difference too. Shooting for the, deer running away and all that. When there's snow is when it's, letting them For me personally, it's a different story if it's bare ground.
For sure.
It's if there's snow on the ground. Anything you can get is kind of like when we used to hunt in the glades off the buggies down there. We were shooting shotguns, break a leg, anything, get them wounded and down, and you're going to kill them. And I kind of look at it the same way on snow.
Yeah, there's no question. But I think another shot people take is they're always thinking about a neck shot, which if you hit the spine, that's going to kill them real quick. But I've seen a lot of people take a neck shot and just crease the neck and not get them. Seen it a lot on bears too. I shot him right in the neck. Well, if that don't hit the spine, you ain't getting them. Usually the same with a deer too, especially on bare ground. Again, why would you do that? I mean, I've shot a lot of them in the neck, but that's the only shot I had. I mean, I'll shoot if I got a little brown spot and I know where it is on the neck. The one I shot last fall, it was the same thing. That's all I had for a shot. So I had a little opening through the raspberries on that brown spot. I knew it was just ahead of the shoulder there, and I fired, and he dropped like a sack of potatoes. But if I got a choice, I'm going to center mass, like Lee calls it.
Yeah,
center mass. All right. Well, I think that's about it for today.
Yeah.
Good conversation, and hope everybody enjoyed that. And if you got any questions, or comments, you can let us know on the forum. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Till next time, good luck on the trail.